Although Yuan was emitting killing intent, he remained unaware of it himself. However, he did notice his unusual reaction toward his opponent. The sheer intensity of his aggression was unlike anything he had consciously intended. Yet, despite sensing this abnormality in himself, Yuan had no clear understanding of why he was reacting this way. A vague feeling stirred deep within him, but the reason remained elusive, leaving him with an unsettling sense of unfamiliarity toward his own actions. The handsome young man frowned after sensing Yuan's killing intent and said, "Hey, are you okay? Did I do something to offend you?" "I don't know. Did you?" Yuan asked, not because he was being snarky. He was genuinely curious if the disciple had offended him. "I mean, this is our first time talking to each other. I can't imagine how I'd manage to offend someone I'm meeting for the first time," the disciple responded. "What's your name?" "I'm Xiao Yang," Yuan suddenly introduced himself. "Bai Zan is my name, and I am ranked first in the outer court," the disciple introduced himself. Yuan had hoped that his name would trigger some kind of memory, but unfortunately, nothing came to mind. "I think it's a misunderstanding. Sorry," Yuan apologized a moment later. "No worries," Bai Zan showed a calm and understanding smile. Since Bai Zan was ranked first in the outer court, he was also at the peak of spirit warrior like Yuan. "Let's have a good fight," Bai Zan said as he retrieved an earth-grade sword. Yuan nodded and retrieved his weapon. Seeing this, the audience quickly woke up from their boredom and became filled with anticipation and excitement. Bai Zan was a widely recognized and respected disciple not just in the outer court but also in the inner court. Not only was he considered a genius, but he also had quite the background, as his grandfather was a high-ranking sect elder in the Immortal Monastery. As for his reputation, Bai Zan was known as a kind and generous man who would always help those around them. He was also humble and treated other disciples with respect despite his grandfather being a sect elder. All in all, he was liked by everybody and only had those who were jealous of his popularity as enemies. "Are you ready to begin?" the sect elder eventually asked. "I am," Bai Zan said. Yuan silently nodded. "Then the match will begin now." Bai Zan made the first move and immediately used the Peerless Immortal technique, boosting a technique that increased his body's capabilities, causing his body to emit a black and red aura. Yuan used nothing but his sword to block the incoming strike before going on the defensive and avoiding the following attacks from Bai Zan. Although it didn't show on his face, his blood was still heated. In fact, it was boiling hotter with each passing moment. This left Yuan puzzled, and he tried to figure out the reason for his anger as he fought Bai Zan. What happened to the young master? Ji Ran mumbled to himself. If Lan Yingying and the others were present, they would also be worried. However, they left after they lost their match so they could immediately continue their training. Since they were confident Yuan would win the entire tournament, they had no reason to stay for the whole thing. Time passed slowly. 5 minutes turned to 10, and then it became 15. Half an hour had passed since Yuan and Bai Zan started their match, marking their match the longest since the start of the tournament, but neither one seemed to be on the verge of defeat. The audience mistook Yuan's seemingly defensive performance as a sign that he was struggling, believing he was at a disadvantage in the fight. Murmurs of speculation rippled through the crowd as they watched, convinced that Bai Zan was pushing him back. However, Bai Zan felt something entirely different. Though he couldn't pinpoint the exact reason, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. There was something off about Yuan, something ominous that sent warning signals through his instincts. As the match reached the hour mark, Yuan's expression suddenly changed drastically. The calm, controlled demeanor he had maintained throughout the fight vanished in an instant, replaced by a look of pure fury. His previously tranquil face twisted with anger, and the killing intent that had momentarily faded came surging back with terrifying intensity. Hey, what are you?" Bai Zan began, his voice laced with nervousness as he sensed the drastic shift in Yuan's aura. Before he could even finish his sentence, Yuan suddenly unleashed the Peerless Immortal technique, amplifying his 1,000-mile sword strike to an overwhelming degree. With immense fierceness, Yuan's sword slashed through the air, sending a terrifying arc of spiritual energy hurtling toward Bai Zan. Bai Zan reacted just in time, managing to raise his sword to block the incoming strike. However, the sheer overwhelming force behind Yuan's attack was far beyond what he had expected. The impact ripped Bai Zan's sword from his grasp, sending it flying through the air before the remaining energy of the strike crashed directly into his body, severing it in half. Everything happened so quickly that neither the audience nor the sect elders had time to react. By the time they fully processed what had transpired, it was already too late. Bai Zhan's body lay split in two on the stage, his blood and organs scattered across the arena in a gruesome display. The silence that followed was deafening. Absolute shock and horror overtook the spectators, their eyes locked onto the carnage before them. Once the sect elder acting as the judge snapped out of his daze, he hastily declared, "N number 8171 disqualified for killing his opponent." What? Ji-ran stood up in shock after hearing that Yuan had been disqualified. However, he was more shocked by Yuan's seemingly random brutality. "How dare you, disciple?" The sect elder turned to face Yuan and shouted at him after declaring the results. "Not only did you kill a fellow disciple, but it was even deliberate." As much as Ji-ran wanted to believe in Yuan, even he couldn't deny that Yuan had purposefully killed his opponent, and it was more unbelievable that Yuan would lose control of his own power. Moreover, Yuan displayed clear killing intent before the match started and right before killing his opponent. Nobody would believe Yuan had killed his opponent by accident, and nobody did. He killed senior apprentice brother Bai Zhan. No way. I knew there was something wrong with that bamboo disciple at the beginning of the match. So he had planned on murdering senior apprentice brother Bai this entire time. The audience was in an uproar because of Bai Zhan's fame. Yuan ignored the audience and faced the sect elder to respond to her question. "I have nothing to say. It's true. I deliberately killed him." Elder Jing and Elder Sun were left speechless after hearing his confession. They wanted to believe it was an accident, but Yuan's confession left no room for doubt. Ah, what a disaster. Even if he's a cultivation genius, he won't be able to get out of this unscathed. I wanted to recruit him as my disciple, too. One of the sect elders around Elder Sun suddenly sighed out loud. Even if the sect leader doesn't punish him, Senior Bai will definitely go after that disciple for killing his grandson. It was widely known that Elder Bai greatly doted and spoiled Bai Zhan, his grandson, so it wouldn't shock anyone if Elder Bai went after Yuan for his actions. It was only a matter of when. Why? Why did you kill him? The sect elder questioned Yuan. He offended me in the past, Yuan calmly responded. What? Sorry, but that's all I can say. Yuan shook his head. That's not good enough. Meanwhile, the sect leader watched everything play out with a slight frown on his face. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and his expression shifted drastically. I remember now. Tian Yang, you bastard. After realizing why he found Yuan familiar, the sect leader leapt from his seat and landed directly in between Yuan and the sect elder. Sect leader. The sect elder immediately took a step back and bowed to him. The sect leader suddenly swung his sleeves, and in an instant, the world around him seemed to freeze. Everything, the audience, the disciples, the sect elders, even the spiritual energy in the air, abruptly stopped moving, as if time itself had been halted. Yuan, however, remained unaffected. Tian Yang, you bastard. What the fuck are you doing here? The sect leader roared, his eyes filled with killing intent. What? Yuan was taken aback by the sect leader's unexpected outburst, especially since Tian Yang's name came out of his mouth, and it was even accompanied by killing intent. However, despite his shock, Yuan managed to keep a straight face and responded, Tian Yang. Are you talking to me? My name is Xiao Yang, though. Bullshit. You may look a little younger, but you're definitely Tian Yang. The sect leader shouted. How else do you explain your mastery of the peerless immortal technique? There's no way you'd manage to reach that level in such a short time. You must have known it prior to coming here. After a moment of silence, Yuan said, it's true. I knew about the peerless immortal technique before coming here. However, that's only because I was taught it by sect leader Ji-ran. I am his disciple, after all. What? The sect leader's expression suddenly froze. Ah, you don't recognize me because I had my mask back then, right? I was the one who asked if I could bring my companions, who would not be participating in the trial, with me. Sure enough, Yuan was wearing a mask before entering the immortal gates. However, that mask disappeared alongside his real body, hence why the sect leader didn't recognize him. The sect leader fell silent with a pondering face. Now that I think about it, there's no way he could be Tian Yang. He looks too young, and that bastard should have died long ago. Eventually, the sect leader realized that he'd made a mistake. However, he didn't apologize and said, "Forget it. Now tell me, why did you kill that disciple?" "Because he offended me," Yuan said, keeping it vague on purpose. "I know you said he offended you in the past. However, you also claimed you'd never met him before." Yuan shook his head and explained, "That was actually a lie. That disciple just didn't remember me, and I agreed with him to make him lower his guard." The sect leader narrowed his eyes at Yuan. Eventually, he said, "Whatever. I don't care why you killed him, but you will be punished accordingly for breaking the rules." "What kind of punishment?" Yuan asked. 10 years in confinement," said the sect leader. Yuan raised an eyebrow and said, "You expect me to just accept this? I'm not spending 10 years in this trial, so you can just disqualify me from the trial entirely. Because you have something to do in the outside world. Then you should be happy to learn that time in this world flows differently, much slower than the outside world. Although you have spent over a year in this world, in reality, only a little over a month has passed in the outside world." "Really?" Yuan's eyes widened with surprise after learning this information. "What would I gain from making such a lie? I was going to announce this information sooner or later, anyway," revealed the sect leader. "Anyway, I will give you two choices since you are currently ahead of the pack. 1. You will spend 10 years in confinement, but your time limit to become an inner court disciple will be halted. Or 2. You will spend 2 years in confinement, but the timer will continue to tick even while in confinement, and all points you earn will be reduced by 50% for the next 5 years. Now, which do you choose?" For the first punishment, Yuan would spend 10 years in confinement, but his 10-year time limit to become an inner court disciple would be halted, so he could come out of the confinement and still have plenty of time to become an inner court disciple. However, the other participants would be far ahead of him. For his second option, instead of 10 years, he would only need to spend 2 years in confinement, but the 10-year time limit would not pause even while he is in confinement, giving him less time to reach his goal. Moreover, all of his earned points would be halved, slowing down his progress even further. No matter which option he chose, it would hurt his progress in the trial. 10 years is too long. I don't care even if I only have a year left to become an inner court disciple since I am already near the goal. The second option is definitely much better for me, even if I have to work twice as hard for the next 5 years. After spending a few moments considering his choices, Yuan responded, "I will choose the second punishment." The sect leader nodded and waved his sleeves again a moment later, unfreezing the time. "For deliberately killing a fellow disciple, I shall sentence you to 2 years of confinement, and all of the contributions you earned during this tournament will be nulled." The sect leader's judgment dumbfounded everybody. However, it was not because it was harsh. Instead, it was an extremely light sentence considering the crime Yuan had committed. Normally, if a disciple killed another disciple on purpose, they'd be crippled and expelled from the sect. Those with more background and protection would receive 10 years of confinement for punishment instead. Yet, Yuan would only receive 2 years for killing one of the most popular and well-liked disciples in the sect, not to mention Bai Zhan's grandfather was an elder of the sect. However, despite the seemingly unfair judgment and favoritism, nobody dared to utter any complaints. "Elder Huang, bring this disciple to the confinement chamber," the sect leader commanded the sect elder, who was also the judge. "As you command." The sect elder proceeded to retrieve a pair of handcuffs made of a type of red jade and cuffed them around Yuan's wrists. The moment the cuffs went on, Yuan stopped being able to feel or control his spiritual energy, almost as if he'd become immortal again. Then, the sect elder wrapped his spiritual energy around Yuan and flew away, taking Yuan away. Ji-Ran could only watch in disbelief as Yuan quickly disappeared from their sight. Meanwhile, the disciples all angrily stared at Yuan, their eyes filled with hatred and rage. Many of them even silently vowed to avenge Bai Zhan once Yuan emerged from his confinement. Once Yuan was taken away and the mess on the stage was cleaned up, the sect leader continued the tournament. However, the atmosphere had drastically changed, and everyone was busy talking about the incident. As for the bamboo disciples, those who were from his group recognized him and said, "Fuck, I knew that murderous bastard couldn't stop himself from killing again." "Huh, you know him?" "Yes, he was from my group in the bamboo garden. He is also the Madman who went on a rampage and killed nearly everyone from my group. I heard about that incident even before leaving the bamboo garden. So he was the one responsible for the massacre, huh? He looks nothing like a killer, though. Don't let his innocent appearance deceive you. His true appearance shows once he starts killing. How did he even manage to reach the peak of Spirit Warrior, anyway? Did he receive a special treasure for being the first one to reach the Immortal Monastery? Who knows? I don't even want to approach him, much less ask him. As for the other disciples, while they didn't dare to criticize the sect leader's judgment in his presence out loud, they did not hesitate to curse Yuan out. That fucker Xiao Yang. I swear he's dead if I ever see him again. Senior apprentice brother Bai Zhan did not deserve such an end. He was such a kind and generous person. He gave me guidance when he saw me struggling in the training grounds even though I didn't ask for it. He also helped me a ton by giving me spirit stones to help with my cultivation. He even told me I didn't need to worry about returning it. The disciples reminisced about all the times Bai Zhan had done good and helped everyone. Meanwhile, the sect elder brought Yuan to the confinement chamber, which was located on a massive mountain. You know, I'm actually glad the sect leader only gave you 2 years. Do you know why? The sect elder suddenly said as they neared a dark, yawning cave entrance that seemed to lead into oblivion. Beside it stood a massive boulder, its size and shape perfectly suited to seal the opening like a door. Why? Yuan asked. Because you'd only live longer if he'd given you a longer sentence. The moment you leave your confinement, Elder Bai, the grandfather of the disciple you killed, will be here to avenge his grandson and take your life. While a disciple is in confinement, they are essentially prohibited from contacting the outside world. This also meant the people outside were unable to contact him, and this included sect elders. Yuan didn't respond to the sect elder's words and only silently gazed at the dark cave entrance. The sect elder proceeded to remove Yuan's cuffs before kicking him in the back, sending him flying into the cave. Enjoy what little time you have left, you bastard, the sect elder sneered, his voice laced with cold satisfaction. With a series of swift hand gestures, the massive boulder trembled before grinding into place, sealing the cave's entrance. Once he confirmed that Yuan had been sealed properly, he turned around and flew back to the arena. This time, it wasn't subtle, it was so overwhelming and palpable that everyone in the audience felt it. A chilling silence fell over the